the remainder of, we're gonna get that straight. Formal written advance notice is required by NJSA 10-4-1, has been provided at this meeting at least 48 hours in advance of today, giving the time, date, and location, and to the extent known at the time, the agenda of this meeting. Such notice stated that formal action may or may not be taken. The meeting will be video recorded and will be broadcast for later viewing for the public. The notice was posted on the bulletin board outside of the office of the municipal clerk, reserved for this and other similar announcements, provided to the Suburban Trends and the Bergen Record, the newspapers designated by the Borough Council to receive such notices, and filed with the Borough Clerk. Can we stand for a pledge, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Karen, can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Quigley?
Here.
Ms. Novak?
Present.
Mr. Ross?
Here.
Mr. Siopa? Absent. Mr. Kimberlin?
Here.
Councilman Delines absent. Mr. Silverstein?
Here. Here's Dean.
No.
Here's Mr. Siopa. Okay,
Mr. Siopa?
is here. Okay, first order of business is approval of the minutes for October 19th, 2023. They were provided to you before the meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion? Have a roll call, please.
Yes. Mr. Quigley?
Yes.
Mrs. Novak?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Siopa?
Yes. No.
Present. Mr. Kimberlin?
Present.
And Mr. Silverstein?
Yes,
I'm present for that, yes.
Right.
Sorry, I came in late.
Yep, okay. No problem.
Changes the votes?
It did.
Okay, we have no correspondence. Ben, you have an executive director's report?
No new business other than attended eight municipalities. But other than the two projects on the agenda today, no.
Okay. The only thing I have to report to bring the board up to date on, and the only other ongoing project that at least we've heard of, is on the lot across from the shopping center, Sujan's project. They're still negotiating with the county. The county negotiations never stop. Every time they think they have something agreed to, the county comes back and decides to do something else. So right now they're working on the angle of the driveway leaving the property. So they're going back and forth with that, and they're still trying to decide with the county on parking. So they still can't come back to us yet until they have that resolved. I want to take the agenda in a little bit different order. Let's go to new and unfinished business first, because I think that's a fairly easy thing to dispose of. Whoever's phone is on, we should turn it off. This is Pompton 5 Associates Urban Renewal LLC, 223 Wanacue Avenue, Block 6300, Lot 34. A bit of history for those of you in the audience. That's the building with the shed on top of it that's been kind of torn down a number of years ago. The project has been stalled. The present owner of the project has found, after significant due diligence, has found a buyer for that project, so that project can continue. That project was approved by the Redevelopment Agency several years ago. And one of the things that's in all of our agreements is that an owner who gets approval through the redevelopment agency cannot transfer their property to another owner or another builder or developer without the approval of the redevelopment agency. So we have vetted the new owners, and we have believed that they can do this, and we have a resolution in front of us that will approve the transfer of the ownership of Pompton 5 Associates Urban Renewal LLC to new owners. It's the ownership that's being transferred. So that's an important, very important for us. The really good thing about this is, in speaking to the new owners, they have committed to us certain things as far as getting this project underway and, most importantly, getting the project completed. So in order to do that, we've also, and do we have to approve the amended agreement?
The resolution before you is
Approves it,
approving
okay.
the execution of.
Okay.
the-
When we approve the resolution to transfer the ownership, we will also be having an amendment to the redevelopers agreement. That agreement basically states that the project that we approved is going to be completed exactly how we approved it. There's going to be no changes if in fact they find something they need to do, or they'll have to come back to us for approval. But most importantly in this is that there's certain requirements that we and the potential new owners have agreed to. The first is that they will be submitting reports to us every 30 days on the progress of the project, either to the executive director or to the agency. They will commence construction within 90 days of receipt of their building permits, and the project is going to be completed within 30 months of the start of construction. So those are important things that give us the confidence that this project will be completed, the sheds will come down, the building will be up, and the kind of eyesore that's there now will go away. Any comments from the board? Okay, so we need a motion, correct? Do you want to add anything to it?
No, that's it. I think that adequately describes it. You met obviously the current redeveloper and the prospective redeveloper who'll be purchasing it, and you authorized the preparation of this and drafting of what is a pretty small amendment to it, really just allowing the new owners, the new entity, new individuals to own it, and a few little changes that the chairman just summarized.
A quick question, will the planning board review the plans? I know, but what year was that?
That was a while ago,
Okay.
several years.
And we don't think they need to do a once-over on it one more time, or?
There's no authority for them to do it if they want to make a change, and they did make one or two changes. Originally it was approved, and then it went up to 30 units, and they had to make one other small change. So they have, within the last several years, but unless they make a change, those approvals are still.
Okay. So can we have a motion, if there's no more further discussion, can we have a motion to approve a resolution of the Pompton Lakes Redevelopment Agency authorizing the transfer of ownership of Pompton 5 Associates Urban Renewal LLC to the new owners?
Motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Okay. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? We have a roll call, please.
Okay, Mr. Quigley?
Yes.
Mrs. Novak?
Yes.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Siopa?
Yes.
Mr. Kimberlin?
Yes.
Mr. Silverstein?
Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Okay, you're welcome.
Joe?
Okay. So the next thing we're going to do, that's the only thing we're going to vote on tonight. The next thing is a conceptual presentation, a second conceptual presentation, or actually maybe even more than that, for Pompton Plaza Associates, 198 to 222 Wanacue Avenue, blocks 3,000, lots 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay? Again, for those of you in the audience that have not been to one of our meetings before, I want to be very, very clear about this, okay? What we're going over tonight is not a hearing. There is no formal application before this board to build this project. This is what a developer has come up with as a plan that they are looking for input and looking to present to us. We are not going to vote tonight on approving this because there is no application in front of us to approve it. We are going to hear them out and see what they have to say. But I want to be perfectly clear, and I want to make sure everybody understands that this board, this agency, is not going to approve this project tonight because there's nothing to approve. It's just a conceptual plan. The other thing I want to make sure everybody understands is the process that this would go through. The gentleman presenting this is, again, giving us this conceptual plan. They can come back to us with an application, okay? That application then would create or start the forum of a public hearing. In that hearing, the developer, his experts, anyone else he wants to have come here would be sworn in to testify. There will not be any of that tonight. This is just conversation. And over a period of time, and again, for those of you that have followed what this agency has done, if you look at the Meridia project or even over on where the Salvation Army was, those projects took several years to get done. So this is not a project that's going to be approved in one meeting, okay? This is not a project that's going to be approved anywhere, if it is approved, okay? It will, once the application is in, if it is submitted, this project will be discussed in public. But there's another caveat in this. Because of what you see before you, it's obviously that the buildings are tall, okay? Our present redevelopment plan does not call for buildings this high. So one of the things that would have to be done is that if in fact we, as the RDA, let's assume we think it's a good project, we would then have to recommend to the mayor and council to amend the redevelopment plan. So while we may vote to approve it, it then goes to the mayor and council to approve the revised redevelopment plan, and in this case, let's just say for height. So there's a lot, and then it goes to the planning board for approval. So I don't want anybody to leave the room tonight saying that this is a project that the redevelopment agency or the borough has decided is going to be built, okay? There's no testimony tonight. There's no one being sworn in tonight. This is just simply a discussion. And what we will do after they have presented what they're going to present, I will open it up for public discussion so anyone here that wants to talk to them about it can do that. Okay, so with those are the ground rules. I hope everybody understands that. I guess, Mr. Beneke, you'll be leading off?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
We have some little technology issues. The one computer actually showed up over there and showed up over there, so we're going to do this the old-fashioned way unless we figure that out. And we may. Carmelina has been great all day. So my name is Bob Beneke. I am a member of the Plumpton Plaza team, managing member. We have our sponsor and our managing director, Vasquez Satrakian, with us tonight. To my left, to his left, is Mr. Higgins. Mr. Higgins knows this town very well and is the lead architect, Marchetto, Higgins, and Stevie. Mr. Stevie, his partner, is behind him. To their left is Mr. Richard Osika, another managing member of Plumpton Plaza, and he is a national, actually an international builder. To my right is Mr. Chuck Oliva. He is a professional engineer and professional planner and has been known to also be a traffic engineer from time to time. The gentleman behind me in that beautiful blue suit is Mr. Stephen Veltri. Mr. Veltri is our attorney. Mr. Veltri is here and you'll see more of him.
Who is that?
To the right of me here, right behind me, is Mr. Richard Tangerian. I think I have that name right. He is our modeler expert, and he is an architectural modeler out of New York, and he has quite a background of modeling various projects of international import, including in Dubai, in Kuwait, other parts of the Middle East, JFK Airport, etc. The models that you have in front of you, there are two. The one immediately in front of me with the two towers that are lit That is the model of the streetscape, and it's a model that shows the heart of the downtown, and the Meridia project is right in front. And then you have our project lit up, or at least our conceptual proposed project. And right in front of that, away from the dais, but in front of me, is the Windsor School. The other model is a more landscape model, spread out, showing the river, showing the lake, showing some of the hill contour, as well as the downtown, and how these two buildings will look and how they will blend into the landscape, if you will. The reason we went through the expense of the models and going through the architectural due diligence, because if you remember, Mr. Chairman, back on August 17th when we were here, you asked for more directional views of the project, of the proposed project. We did some surveys on the PowerPoint. If it does come up, we can show you some of that, and you'll see why these models make a better representation. For full disclosure, we wanted to make sure that you saw both a Earth type of view using Google Earth, etc., and also the downtown model as well. So that's sort of the lay of the land. You're 100% correct. We have been here a couple times before. Back in July of 2020, during the heart of the pandemic, Mrs. Satrakian and one or two others joined you for a Zoom meeting and a robust discussion of the preliminary of this plan. And the preliminary of this plan was presented with an architectural rendering and the like, and it showed a bulk project, if you will, with some step backs, but a bulkier project on the Main Street directly. That project then morphed into this project that you see before you. That project was actually conceptually approved by resolution of the redevelopment agency back at that point in time. Then we have another conceptual meeting that was held, a committee meeting, which led to our designation as redeveloper on April 20th of this year. We have been conditionally designated as redeveloper. However, Mr. Satrakian owns the property, so that's more of a natural occurrence. Then we have again on August 17th, we came here and we provided the PowerPoint and a more robust discussion, and then tonight we conclude with our final discussion and hopefully into some more fruitful events as we go forward. The block is 3,000. The lots, as you indicated, are lots 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 along Wanacue Avenue, 198 to 222 Wanacue Avenue. It's approximately 1.75 acres, and this current zoning is a DRA1, as Downtown Redevelopment Area 1, that overlays the Downtown Business District 1 zone. The way that the borough began the redevelopment process, with one or two exceptions. One exception was the unit size of the apartments or the residences that were envisioned. The borough kept the underlying zoning in place. I think that's important for the board, the public, the mayor and council to remember. The underlying zoning was kept in place 15, 20 years ago. When the redevelopment process began, rather than try to cobble together and assemble properties and figure out what people were going to do, and at the time we were going into the Great Recession, the underlying zoning was used with one or two exceptions. One exception was, again, the 750 square foot minimum apartment size, which was modified for the Meridia project. And number two was the shared parking concept. Number three, which was rather interesting, was that any element of bulk standards could actually be provided by the planning board. So the planning board could actually provide relief under the redevelopment area zoning. And I have those documents here. Without further ado, what we'd like to do is go over the site. Mr. Olivo's going to start out. He's going to go through site circulation. He's going to go through the area real quickly, and then we'll jump into some others. And after Mr. Olivo's done, we're going to hear from Mr. Osika.
Just one slight correction.
Sure.
When you were here years ago, and did present some drawings, okay? Okay, we didn't approve that as a conceptual plan, we approved that we would like this area redeveloped,
Fair.
okay? Nothing was approved, no buildings were approved.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you again for having us this evening. Just for the record, my name is Charles Olivo. As Mr. Beneke mentioned, I'm the founding partner of Stonefield Engineering and Design. We've worked on a number of projects within the borough. I have a Bachelor of Science in the field of civil engineering from the University of Notre Dame. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I'm a certified professional traffic operations engineer. I'm also a professional planner. I've testified before over 200 municipalities in the state of New Jersey as an expert in those fields of site engineering, traffic engineering, and planning. I recognize tonight that we're here for an informal discussion about this redevelopment project.
Before you go on, is there some way we can put that easel so that everybody can kind of see it? I mean, it's really hard without this working, but maybe if you go back there, it's a little bit easier.
And I think we have the benefit of the model, which I know Mr. Beneke referred to. And I think we all know this area quite well, but I'll do my best to kind of narrate through and show the aerial exhibit. In the center of the exhibit is where we have the project site. As Mr. Beneke mentioned, with 5 parcels within your downtown area here in the borough. In this location, we are somewhat centrally located between the rail line towards the north, which kind of forms that northerly boundary to this downtown area. Down to the south of the page, or off to the bottom of the page, is where you come to Max, and then ultimately the Valley Bank, which is effectively where Wanacue Avenue as a downtown roadway transitions more into what I would call a roadway of that county arterial road nature as you're traveling through this area. I went to high school at Wayne Valley, I grew up in Wayne, so I'm very familiar with the area. This is an exceptional downtown that you don't necessarily find within this area. We didn't have a downtown in the township of Wayne. I think it's something that I would have always longed for when I was younger and even now. And I think for that reason, these types of areas within the county are extremely important to find a way to preserve them and also to create long-term stability and growth within the area, which is why we feel this project has that kind of transformative element to it, and that it can really raise the bar and the standard in terms of what we need within these downtown areas that have struggled for many decades, but something that we have here that's great, that we want to make sure in the long term survives and has the retail viability, the residential viability to have good tenancy for many decades going forward. So as part of looking at the project site, what our firm has done is an extensive site survey from a civil engineering perspective, but also from a traffic engineering perspective. When we look at these older downtown areas, and you think about the way that the buildings create this street wall on Wanacue Avenue on both the left and right hand side, or the east and west side of Wanacue Avenue, in downtowns, this is what you find. You find your buildings pressed up close to the roadway. You generally find very limited numbers of driveways as you're going up and down the road, and that is meant to preserve pedestrian walkability. Those sidewalk areas become the areas where patrons and customers walk up and down after they find on-street parking to go in and out of the shops. It's easy to go from one shop to another. It's easy to cross Wanacue Avenue to go from one side of the street to the other if you're a customer of various different retailers, schools. We have the great art center as well within this downtown stretch. Behind the buildings, particularly on the west side of the street, I'm sure everyone here is very familiar with the nature of the parking lots and either the organization or lack thereof. Some are paved, some are not paved, some have arrows, some do not. But although rather disorganized, it serves as the service alleyways and the parking behind the retail, behind the commercial uses. And you can wind effectively all the way to the south to Max, all the way to the north to Lakeside, across from the Wells Fargo, near the rail line. And what you'll see on the aerial exhibit, you see these building depths change when you get to the Windsor School rather significantly. We have the Solar Products Building tucked well to the west near the Wanacue River, and that is effectively where this redevelopment project is located. There are a number of very narrow alleyways, some of them rather steep as they climb towards Wanacue Ave on the west side of our downtown road. And those can create some challenges. We met with the county back in February of this year to discuss this project and the access. One of the first things that they said was, if we are going to build a project that has residential and retail associated with it, that the 18-foot alleyway that exists providing access to the site would need to be widened to county standards. Many of these alleys are probably 100 or so years old, and they were built at the time that these buildings were originally built. So with the county, the first thing they were looking for is to really bring that into compliance. The second thing would be to perform a traffic impact study to show that any access to and from this site, preferably a two-way access point, would effectively work the way it needs to in order to support the project that we have here before the board. The project is comprised of 380 residential units and approximately 17,000, just under 17,000 square feet of retail. What I'll show you here is a top-down view of the concept plan of the site. So effectively, if you were to go up above the model that we have on the board, this is what the site would look like in a redeveloped fashion. Wanacue Avenue is traveling along the bottom of the page. To the right-hand side of the exhibit is north as we approach the rail, and to the left-hand side is south as we go towards Valley of the Columbia Bank. What we're proposing to do is completely change the nature of the buildings, the footprint, and also how these 5 pieces, not just one piece, it comprises about 1.75 acres or 76,000 square feet in our downtown. And so what we're seeking to do is really bring it into more modern compliance with how the buildings are sited. The 2 darker shades close to Wanacue Avenue are what we call Building 1. And you'll see that that is the shorter building towards my side of the table. Building 2 is a building located in the 2 darker shades towards the rear. The white areas and also the lighter gray area that is between the 2 structures that comprise Building 1 are all pedestrian alleys. Very much in keeping, actually, with more historic downtown areas where pedestrians were prioritized over vehicles. You also see this in a lot of European countries and cities where walkability is of a higher priority than necessarily where vehicles are going and parking. So what we've done here is create this excellent pedestrian plaza behind the building faces on Building 1. And that, just to point out in the model, is within this area here, which would be completely new. We would essentially flatten out the area as you come off Wanacue Avenue. You'd be able to walk between the buildings and then come into an area that is only for pedestrians, no vehicles. So you create storefronts behind the storefronts, bolstering and reinforcing retail viability within the downtown. You're creating that second layer of retail behind the main street. That would be the programming. You see the lighter shades of gray and boxes. Those are awnings, doorways, with all kinds of streetscape elements. So what I mean by that is the textured pavements that you typically find. What we've also done, and this is a subtle detail, but if you're familiar with the roadway and coming out of the alleyways, is a lot of times when you come out of the alleyways, particularly in the evening, it's very hard to judge whether or not there are any patrons walking and customers walking on the sidewalk. Buildings are pressed up close to the road, which creates great intimacy in downtown areas. The challenge with that is when cars were introduced and these alleys started to service cars, it's very challenging to see to your left and the right without the buildings daylighting some of that pedestrian walkability. So what we've done here is bring these buildings back off the right-of-way line, increase the width, almost doubling the sidewalk width, sending a very loud message about the importance of pedestrian walkability. We're using that area in space to allow for better pedestrian visibility and walkability along the downtown road. We also bring those sidewalks into the site. The building corner is set well back off the road. Now when you would come out of this driveway, you would have clear visibility to your left and your right. What's a very tight driveway now would become 24 feet in accordance with state county guidelines. In addition to that, we bring the sidewalk alongside of it, and it widens to 26.5 feet. It also travels under a section of the building, which creates a sense of place. As you're coming down the driveway, we're able to flatten the slope. Some of these alleyways today, when you come up and if you're waiting for a gap in traffic, start to roll back a little bit, then you see a gap in traffic, then you can go. It's a challenging dance in a vehicle with these roadways that were really designed not for the cars of today. So a lot of this project is about, I think, a great gesture to the downtown that has been here since the beginning of the borough, but raising the standard of many of these design elements as much as we can to bring it into modern compliance and to marry the old history with new, safer, more effective ways to design and build. The back buildings, as you see in the model, are the taller buildings. The reason that those buildings are the taller buildings is because now we're pushing back off of the roadway and we're creating less impact. We're closer to the river. That is truly where massing and height, that's where it should be. Back off the road, no impact to any residential structures within the area. And again, it's creating this layered effect that this downtown is substantial. And these buildings, the residents of these buildings are able to take an elevator down, walk to retail, walk throughout the downtown, support all the buildings within this area to tie it all together and to really truly anchor it for the decades to come. In terms of parking, there'd be an element of self-parking as you come down the driveway and make a right turn into a garage level, and there'll also be an automated parking garage to really utilize the volume of the building as effectively as possible. Our firm designed, studied, and is now part of the construction management team of the Capadagli, the Meridia project across the street. We worked with the borough as part of the pond hole, repaving, restriping, everything that happened there. Because when you touch one building in the downtown, you end up touching a lot of other properties. It's natural that that happens. And there can be very positive impacts of that as a result of redevelopment, because those people that live in those buildings, people that shop in those buildings, they are connected to all the buildings in the, in the downtown. And that is why we feel that the massing, the scale, and what is envisioned here as part of the project is completely in keeping with the spirit of anchoring, building, and bolstering a great downtown that you've had here for many years.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Olivo just went over the site. I know it was more verbal. We do have the maps up on the board. We do have the availability of PowerPoint. I have several copies of PowerPoint. I'll, of course, provide it to your professionals and the board secretary, the agency secretary. Before we get into the next step, what I would like to do is introduce Mr. Richard Osika. Mr. Osika is a managing member of Pumpkin Plaza. Mr. Osika is going to give us a little bit of his background.
Okay.
He's the one that's actually...
I think what we'd like to do,
Yeah.
simply because these monitors are not working,
Yeah.
I think it would be a good idea if the public could have some input or just ask some questions.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay?
Yeah.
As we do each person.
Sure.
And also, you know, if you have a question specifically about something, if you want to walk up and point it out at the model, that would probably be a good idea, because we were trying to make sure everybody gets to see it, but we're having some issues.
One thing, I do have a screen and a projector that I can set up. If we can, when we get to a point we can take a break for a couple minutes, I can do that very quickly, and we can show that on the side over here.
Mr. Stevie's our architect's partner.
Oh, okay. I guess, do you have a computer that's going to work on?
Yes.
Well, these actually worked on that for about 5 minutes, but they don't crosstalk the TVs, that's the problem, so.
Well, if you want to set that up while we do this, that would be fine, just so we do it quietly, that would be good.
So Mr. Oliva will take
Yeah.
any and all questions.
So does anyone in the public have any questions for what you just heard? Or want to come up and take a look at the model? Any clarification that anybody would want? Yeah, come on up.
Okay, I don't believe you mentioned, how many parking spots are going to be in that self-parking?
There's a total of 594 parking stalls, 1.5 per unit. That's self-parking and the automated garage.
And any exhibit on the Avenue is going to be brand new?
Yes,
There'll be a new driveway going down?
that's correct, yes. Widened, new, repaved, reset, yes.
You have traffic studies on, rush hour?
We do.
When cars leaving to go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning?
Yes.
How long does that take? Those are going to be like 2 hours to get out of the parking lot?
No. The second thing Passaic County asked us for back in February of this year was that a full comprehensive traffic impact study be prepared, counting the number of vehicles that are going up and down Longview Avenue during the highest peak periods. So our firm went out and conducted traffic counts. Every 15 minutes, we summarize the amount of traffic volume using the roadway during the peak hours. About 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning, about 5 to 6 p.m. in the evening, and then we went back out on Saturday from 11 a.m. to noon, or 11:30 to 12:30. That's typically when you find the detailed traffic to be at the highest level. Generally speaking, all of the peak hours are about the same. You have somewhere around 300 to 450 vehicles in the north and south during those peak periods. Outside of the peak, those volumes soften and come to a lower level. The city county asked that we prepare a traffic impact study that would calculate with the new vehicles coming out of this driveway. As you mentioned, you have 380 units, you have the retail. How many vehicles does that create during the hours? And what are the levels of service and delay that are incurred both to the existing traffic and those new vehicles that come in and out of the roadways? Generally speaking, the county looks for your driveways to operate better than a level of service D or E. Roughly a rule of thumb for Passaic County, and we are under those thresholds based on the traffic impact study. All of that data would be submitted as part of an application. Certainly happy to make it public, share that.
I'm just interested, if I walk out of my apartment,
Yes.
and, 7:45, expecting to go to work, how long before I can get actually on the road?
About 30 to 40 seconds to make a left turn onto the road.
Okay, back in the corner. Who's up first? All the way to the back.
Parking spots, are they all for residential for the units, or is that going to be for borough 2 as well? They're strictly for the residents.
We're happy to work with the borough on that. We're providing 1.5 per unit. The Capadagny project across the street was approved at 1.3 per unit. In the last 5 years, our company has surveyed about 40 built projects that account for about 7,000 units in New Jersey. The reason that we did this is I was tired of seeing empty floor plates of parking within newly built projects. And so we went out and actually counted garages, how many parked vehicles were in garages of built projects. Generally, we find ratios of about 1 to 1.25. I really do think I've driven through this network a number of times, studied it over the last 3 years. If you were to go to the Pond Hole lot 2 hours ago, it's probably 20%. And you have a fairly large parking field there. The whole idea is let's not keep building parking that's going to be empty for 50, 60, 70% of the day. So if the borough were to come back and say, we'd like some type of understanding if this parking can be shared with retailers in the downtown, I think that's something that we'd be happy to discuss. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Have you also gone over like what the impact, like of the infrastructure is? Are you gonna go over that tonight?
Not tonight, but you have to look at that if you're gonna build a project like this. We would have to study the sewer lines, we'd have to study the storm sewer, the drainage systems. It's actually one of the benefits of a redevelopment project like this because nothing triggers that for any renovations or improvements along the downtown today. If a new tenant comes in and it's a little bit more intense than the tenant that was before it, you're not gonna get an extensive study of the storm sewer. You're not gonna get an extensive study of the sanitary sewer. No disrespect to the engineering department. I'm not saying that could not be done, but it's rare when you have a tenant-to-tenant swap. When you come in with redevelopment projects like this, you really have to study all of the infrastructure within the area to make sure that it can handle it. And that's why I believe, as the chairman stated, these things take time to really understand what kind of impact they're going to have, both above the ground, under the ground, around the site. The good news is between this agency, the DEP, the state county, I've done projects across the state. These are some of, I would say, very good to work with, but some of the more challenging agencies to work with because they really do look at the very details of the project and make sure that no stones unturned.
Go ahead.
This has to be DEP approved, right? It's in the
Absolutely,
flood zone?
absolutely has to be DEP approved, yes.
Talk
Jennifer?
about the flood zone for a second, he has to follow up.
This is located within a flood. Again, I grew up in Wayne. Anyone who knows this area knows that our bodies of water flood. We have figured out a way to adapt and live around that. And what the DEP continues to do is literally raise the bar when it comes to the analyses, the permitting, the process that you have to go through if you are going to build anything in and around the flood. So for example, a project like this would have to provide 1-to-1, 380 parking stalls above the flood. Has to be done so that there's the ability to evacuate in case of a flood. Those rules are not bent. They are not wiggled. I've worked on 100 projects that require FHA approval or flood hazard area approval. They are rigid and they stick. Because in 2023, we know better than to build a lot of these structures. Again, there are structures, there are buildings that are habitable that are in the flood today.
So that parking lot would have to be elevated then, wouldn't it?
The parking lot doesn't have to be elevated, but your habitable areas have to be above the flood. We need to make sure to get the people out. Typically what happens in the parking lots is they are signed in case of a flood emergency. And now with all the data and everyone checking the weather probably every 15 minutes during a storm event, we know when we need to get to higher ground. And so it's important that those areas are signed and kept a certain way so that you know during those types of conditions, we're not parking lots of vehicles there. There's nothing to stop people from parking there today. They do, and many times you find old vehicles, trailers left in those areas because they fall into disrepair and can't be moved.
Jennifer? Go ahead.
I just want to ask you to clarify something. You may have addressed this, but your traffic study, it measures the existing traffic in our borough today. That's what you're anticipating traffic based on the amount of parking spaces for this building that you're proposing, correct?
It does both.
It does both.
Starts with the existing, then we layer on top of that growth, then we layer on top of that our projects.
Is the data from that study merged with the data from the Meridia building that's going up, which has traffic that's anticipated that is not currently present on our roads now?
Absolutely. That is actually what's called, you put it much better than I, but I'll use the technical term. It's called a no-build condition. It means we have the base existing condition. That's what we count now. The no-build condition is any growth associated with either population growth or what you just said, what we call site-specific growth. On top of that is our project, which is called the build condition. That is the parameter that we study, the worst-case scenario of the project build.
And do you have any way to anticipate at what point that puts us where there's any more potential for further redevelopment for us. If let's just say hypothetically, there's 2 or 3 more projects that come down the pipe, how close are we to maxing out what that could possibly look like?
It does tell you that what you can do at that highest level is something we call a sensitivity analysis, which is how much capacity is left before we max out. So you can absolutely do that. Yeah.
Chuck, one point, I'm sorry, we put up on this board where the residences start, so that the board, the agency, and the public can see the street to the right, and then how the residences are above the grade.
Let me see if I can explain this section, because these are always kind of interesting to look at. This area is Wanacue Ave. We basically sliced down the alley, and we're looking at the buildings. This is Wanacue Ave on sidewalk. This is building 1, the first building. About 30-foot clear of retail. That's beautiful retail space. Most of the retail buildings you walk in today are maybe 9-10 feet. This is meant to create open, airy, great retail tenants, very attractive to a lot of your higher-end retailers. 2 floors of residential above that. That creates what I would call the street wall, or the storefront area on Wanacue. Now, what I was speaking about in the back, the outdoor plaza, is this open section between building 1 and building 2. That is all walkable, pavered, landscaped, awnings, exceptional downtown quality and feel. So you have retail, walkable, plaza, retail. Above that is, I wouldn't even call it a half floor, but it's like a quarter floor of residential. And then we go up to the top, 12 stories above that. That is well set off behind Wanacue. Wanacue Ave is here. We start that building face back here. The floors below that are either automated or self-park.
And they're out of the flood zone,
They're out.
they're out.
They're out. Yes.
And what's the grade difference between Wanacue Avenue and the back of the property, the rear property, 20 feet or so?
About 20 feet. We're about 216 up at Wanacue Avenue. We dropped to about 195, 196 off the rear.
Good.
Which is in the flood, absolutely. About 7 feet.
I know the mayor had a question, I interrupted.
Yeah, I know one thing you were talking about the traffic studies, which I appreciate.
Yes.
But I think anybody from town would argue that one of the more anticipated times of traffic would be when the schools are all getting out.
Yes.
Okay, and it doesn't seem to study that. I'd like to see that in the study because of 2 things. You have 3 schools to the right,
Yes.
but you also have a winter school in the middle that has its own traffic.
It does, no doubt. We counted all the buses that came in the morning and all the ones that left in the evening, but we'd be happy to, you're right, there's the window, 7 to 9 a.m. is generally where the rush hour falls. 4 to 7 is the next commuter rush hour, but when you have school activity, you have high school, you have Windsor School, you have all the schools within the area, you'd generally be looking at a 2 o'clock to 3:30, and we'd be happy to study that.
Again, just so the public knows, again, as I mentioned at my beginning comments, this is conceptual. You know, if in fact they put in an application, what you just went over and the traffic studies would be subject to our questions, and more than likely, we would be asking you to do more things than you've done now.
Absolutely.
Okay, so again, this is just surface that we're trying to get an idea of what's happening.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Beneke.
Thank you. So, great, good questions, obviously.
Could I just get one more in?
Sure, go ahead.
So what kind of retail are you envisioning in there? You done any kind of surveys on that, or?
The building right now is fully tenanted. We actually have a new retail store that's going in, a high-end retail store. We have the coffee shop there. I call it a coffee shop. It's actually a great coffee boutique with other crafts components to it. Jewelry stores going in. We have a tax preparer in there. We have all sorts of other retail and semi-professional, professional services that will all be reprogrammed back into the building. And one of the things that I wanted to stress business-wise is that the building itself is almost fully tenanted. And we want to keep that tenancy going. We want to see the retail be very vibrant. That's why we have that plaza and that square, and as Chuck and as the architects will show you, we have put a lot of thought into that pedestrian movement with restaurants, with the tenants that we have, with the jewelry type stores upscale. So we have all that in place.
Okay, let's continue.
Sure. So Mr. Richard Osika is another managing member of Pompton Plaza. He's going to be the one that's going to be building this. Okay? I just want to get you a sense, now that you know conceptually what we may want, you see the models, you see some of the outlines and some of the structure. Before we get into the design, just want Mr. Osika to go over his background. He's done a lot of input and given a lot of input as to this project. So go ahead.
So, good evening, everybody. As part of the team, I've worked with Baskin now for 3 years, about 3 years. I own a company called Bilko Construction. We're headquartered in Salabrook. We have offices throughout the United States as well, also in Europe. But this is the type of product that we usually come across. Baskin was very adamant on bringing an iconic product into the city, and we spearheaded a little bit, but I want something that I want to be proud of. It's a legacy for him, so that's a lot of sweat and tears went into this. So I wanted to introduce myself.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have just a brief comparison. 3 years ago, when we submitted our conceptual plan, the building looked something like this. There are 2 shots here. And that was envisioned, was very bulky, had more units than today. The parking situation was not as studied, the traffic situation. We just want to give you a comparison of this versus this, and how we've evolved the project over time. Looking at the aerial shot that Chuck just went through, Mr. Olivo, we then come up with this. And with that, I'd like to segue into Mr. Higgins, who is our architect of record. And before Mr. Higgins goes into the architecture, just wanted him to briefly go over his background in our fine borough here.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. I know several of you very well from high school and before that. So I'm Mike Higgins. I'm the managing partner of MHS Architecture. We're an architecture firm based in Hoboken, New Jersey. We specialize in these downtown redevelopment plans and mixed-use multifamily buildings of all sizes in both downtowns and cities throughout New Jersey and the tri-state area. I also grew up in Pompton Lakes. I'm from Pompton Lakes. Like I said, I went through the school system. Half my family still lives in Pompton Lakes. So it's a town that I appreciate and I do have a lot of respect for. And I'm happy and very excited to be part of a large transformative project like this. The project that we're looking, I'm not sure what order these slides are going to be, what slides are going to show.
Let's show this slide first. That slide.
Okay. So when Baskin first came to us with looking to do a large project, we had already done some work on a previously very large project. We had some pause at first because we thought it didn't really make sense for the site. But after he was fairly adamant about it, he wanted to see a large project here. So we were looking for an opportunity to create a place. Sometimes when you're doing a lot of density in a downtown area, what we like to do is create a place that people can become part of the town center. We have some examples of recent projects that we completed, like the Wellmont Theater, where we did a large public plaza there in Montclair. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that project, but it's been very successful. We have some nice images of the plaza full with people, and they have different kind of street fairs and all that sort of thing. So what we did here.
How's this one?
Okay, this will work. So we created if we maybe go to one of the street views, because that would be good. By separating the building into 2, we pull this building away from the neighboring buildings. Sorry, just on this side. To create the plaza that Chuck had talked about. It's about 11,000 square foot public space. It's accessed from either side through the middle, but pulling the buildings out of the fabric that three-story building allows it to be a very special building, sort of iconic. And it's probably the most beautiful part of the project right now. That's where we spent the most time, but the concept was to create a public place. And that's one of the things that we find very important and very exciting. So let's go to one of the slides that show the space there. And keep going, maybe one next. So this one, and maybe the next one, this shows, the public plaza, and it could be used for the street fairs on Pompton Day. 3M could play there, then on the library front lawn, they could play over here. This could be, and it happens to be, the building is situated, the site's situated right in the center of town. So it gives you an opportunity to do something very special. I know the building's very large, and for Pompton Lakes, it's going to be one of the main obstacles, but what we find is, this is one property, it's an opportunity that doesn't come along all that often to build a large project in town that can add a number of people to the street, so you have more activity in the downtown. It can really revitalize the town. The building itself, when they're tall, they can be very iconic. We would do an excellent job designing it, but as you see in the larger context model, the building doesn't feel that bad because you have a very hilly topography. Some of the other slides we have show the views from up above in the building, what the views would be like, because the landscape around this area is phenomenal. The whole northern, the Rampole Mountains and everything throughout the area. So the views from the building itself would be very impressive. The way you would access the building, the residential building, the parking comes down through the road to the side, you park within the building. But the lobby for the residential building would be behind the front building, the commercial building, with the retail that's lining the entire base of the building. The other thing the density allows you to do is create a building that have all the type of amenities that people are looking in these sort of buildings nowadays. So you'll have the pools and the co-working stations and the fitness and health and wellness, all the type of things. And you can see a landscape green roof with all the, a pool deck and all those kind of amenities. The building is 13 stories above the street level. It has 380 residential units within it. It's a mix, it's primarily one-bedroom units, 290 of the units are one-bedroom units. There is 14,000 square feet of amenity space.
No, the other, we were in the right place. Outside of that pole. That one right there.
Right. And 13 stories above retail, 16,000 square feet of retail space. That public plaza is about 11,000 square feet. This is some of the examples. I don't know if, so this is, we've done a lot of work in downtowns. This one happens to be in Morristown on the Hart Street. This was a building in front of the public parking facilities that we built over the entrance to the parking garage. This one is one in Hoboken that I brought in, so we showed one project that had a little sense of the scale of this type of project. So this one had a brick masonry base that was 4 stories, and then set back from that are 2 glass towers that go up to 12 stories. This one is on the Avenir project, which is along the path line in Jersey City.
It's on the west side.
Right. And just similar to give a sense of, since these towers right now are only conceptually designed, it's not necessarily what the towers would look like, but it's just meant to give you a sense of the scale. We did try to spend a lot of time on, this is the Wellmont Theater site, so that, again, we're going out of order here. But that's what the plaza could kind of feel like.
If I could, we keep talking about height above street level, 13. What's the total height if we're looking at the back of the building?
The total height in feet is probably on that section. It's difficult with a automated parking garage because there really aren't stories in there. It's sort of one volume and then the cars are set inside there. So it's something in the range of 15 stories probably from the back.
It is, and it's 15 stories and it's 190 feet from the back, and from the front, it's just under 170 feet.
So what we tried to do was push the towers as far back as we could, so they're about 130 feet back, so that the main building that's perceived from a pedestrian point of view is a well-articulated building, red brick with arches. We try to develop something that has contextual sensitivity in terms of taking cues from the high school building and other important buildings in town. And it would just have that type of very rich detailing that creates an iconic small building in the front, and then a treatment for the building in the back that could make it noticeable from a distance, but try to, as innocuous as possible for a large project in the back. But mostly, the way pedestrians perceive of building height is sort of what you see as you're walking down the street and what you come into contact. It's really that first story, two-story, three-story that you see. You're not looking up all the time at the taller buildings, so.
Okay.
What else would you add?
No, I think it'd be great to see the renderings, the views from the street, because they tell the best story.
You open Bruce's PowerPoint?
Yeah.
There we go. Let's go.
That was quick.
That's all, folks.
We got that.
Keep going.
Okay, there.
Okay, so this is a view sort of from the Washington building looking towards the front. So you can see that and get a little bit of a feel of the character of the building. It would be, the building would be set back to create a wider sidewalk, so rather than the 8-foot sidewalks we have now, or whatever might be trying to buildings down, it would be probably twice that, like a 15-foot deep sidewalk. It'll wrap all the way around the building and then the plaza behind, which will access, you can access both through the center or from the end around the entire building.
Can you stay on that slide just for a second? You mentioned that the building is set back,
Yes.
but from looking at it from this angle, it looks like it's forward from the historic buildings that are there, most notably the building on the right.
Yeah, I think it's just deceptive. I don't know if it's the.
It's a perspective.
It's the way the perspective works sometimes.
Okay.
But it actually has doubled the depth of the sidewalk. If the sidewalk goes from 8 feet to about 15 to 17 feet.
So again, a very tall retail space, and the opportunities for outlet dining around that whole area to be a protected area. But we kept that first floor very tall, so that as you pass under it through the center arcade, it just feels like a very open space.
And I do think that one of the strong design challenges we saw is you have a very quaint downtown. Downtown has unique architecture, so we wanted to create a building that blended with that architecture. So that front building really allows us to do that. It's a smaller building, so you can add incredible detail to it. It has a cornice line on it that follows the cornice lines of the buildings that are on the street. So where your eye goes up, it hits the cornice line and it almost stops your eye from going further. The other thing that's very interesting about this is there's an opportunity, and we're not saying that this is something that we'd have to do a study with the traffic, but there's an opportunity to do a mid-block crossing at that location that maybe connects through to that open area between the retail on that ground floor. That would encourage pedestrians that are walking on the opposite side of the street to come down and go into the plaza space. There's different ways of controlling that from a traffic perspective, but it's just an idea at this point.
So, okay, sure. So I'm always amazed, and the drawings are great, I love the drawings, and everything looks really nice. But every time I see drawings from all the developers, there's never cars in front of the buildings parked. So, are you planning, one, is there parking in front of the building? And the second question I have is, if you have all this retail there, there's gonna have to be, and I know this would be a conversation later on, some type of parking provided for them to park. Right? I mean, right now, what is your plan at this moment, where you have all these pretty retail spaces, where are they parking?
So we have 594 parking spaces. Those 594 parking spaces are at a ratio, as Chuck pointed out, at 1.5. During the course of a given day, at least 25 to 30%, any given day, including Saturday, perhaps not Sunday, 25 to 30% of the parking spaces are vacated for at least a 7-hour staggered period. During that point in time, you will have approximately 140 to 160 spaces that are allowed for the retail. So what we're proposing in our redevelopment plan amendment to the mayor and council is that the 1.5 spaces be sufficient and be counted for the residences and the retail, based upon the shared parking arrangement that's already embedded in the ordinance. That's what we're asking for. We believe, based upon the current parking of our full retail, and that's what pointed out to the gentleman's question before, that we have sufficient parking today. It's all surface parking, even with the Windsor School, and we will continue to have that. We will have approximately 140 minimum parking spaces, perhaps not on Sunday, but on 6 days a week for the retail and the non-residential purposes.
Can I just go back to when you were here a few months ago? I thought what I heard, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, is that the mechanical parking was for the tenants, and that the non-mechanical, or we'll call it surface parking, would be for tenants and for retail. So the retail will not be using the mechanical.
That's correct.
Okay, just want to make sure that's...
That's correct. You don't want to have individuals that are not familiar with the system to...
Yeah, I understand. I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page with that.
Fair.
Okay.
And just the second part, do you plan on putting parking in front of the building or you don't?
Yes.
Yeah, right now, the street parking will remain. There's an opportunity to do some traffic calming, one of those bump outs, so maybe a few spots will be taken out if that makes sense to everyone. But
You can see that it's sort of at that, if there was a mid-block crossing, we provide a bump out, so that it shorten the distance that pedestrians have to travel. It would also slow the traffic down.
But that's all in negotiations with the county, because that's not our road.
that's sort of, that's just an idea.
Maybe we
got it.
show cars.
Okay.
That one you show cars. You show what?
Two.
Have anything else, or can folks ask questions?
I think we could go to questions. I mean,
Yeah.
there's more
I
slides.
think there's a couple more slides.
Okay.
Just go through the slides just so everybody can see.
Okay.
This is my favorite, that's why we put it in the master PowerPoint as well, just to show the activity.
Just what that could feel like, that plaza. I mean, like I said, the one we talked about is very successful. We've done some in Hoboken, Garden Street we use, which is, again, use it for farmers markets during the summer, use it for Christmas trees and different things in the seasonal parties.
There will be retail on both sides of this plaza space, so there'll be a lot of action. And then there's you could also, I think we'll get to that after we get keep looking through the slides. Let's see, this is actually you see this shows the entranceway down to the
That's
parking
the
garage.
road right now that goes down. So we're gonna level it out and then move it back so that it shouldn't be part of that plaza.
So that, where people were walking there, that's not the way it really is going to be, because that's also going to be for vehicles, correct?
Oh, part of it, we made it wider. Yeah.
No, I understand that, but it'll look like a street. There'll be sidewalks on both sides?
Well, potentially. So there's two different schools of thought for that. One is that it becomes what's called a shared street. It's where vehicles and pedestrians occupy a similar space. And if that's the case, then that shared street would be defined more with bollards, protective bollards that would keep vehicles from pulling off of the roadway, that would define the roadway, but it would feel like a larger open pedestrian space. So I think that would be more what we would recommend. It's better for traffic calming. You're not going to get people that go, when there's a defined roadway, a car will usually go faster.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that there's vehicles on that.
Yes.
Okay.
We would just like it to have a different material, a different pattern, right? That would be ideal. So it felt like part of the plaza.
So that's 24 feet there.
It's 24 plus the building setback. I forgot what distance the total space would be now.
The open space between?
Yeah, all the way.
Between the Windsor School and your building, yeah.
It's something like 40.
Oh, okay.
More than 30 feet.
That's nice, yeah.
It'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 34 plus feet.
Okay.
We have 15 to 19 feet now, let's call it 19 feet.
45 feet.
And we're gonna
45
have
feet.
more, so 45 feet.
It's gonna be very large.
Okay, thank
That's why we
you.
pulled the building.
Thank you.
And that was one of the feedback we got from the county. This slide, I think, might deserve some explanation. This shows the Capadaglia project together with our.
So this is just to see from a pedestrian's point of view, the feeling that a 5-story wall has along Wanacue Ave with the narrow sidewalks, and then the feeling that our building will have, although the back buildings are taller, the front building will have a much nicer scale, it'll be set back, and like Bruce said, can have a lot of architectural detailing associated with it, with the arch windows, the cornice lines, the pointing, a lot of features, and we've done a lot of that stuff because we work in a lot of historical towns and cities throughout New Jersey, so we're very good, and Bruce particularly is very good at doing that sort of thing.
So we're gonna get into some data now, but if anyone has
Do you have any
questions.
questions for the architect? Mike?
The conceptual that you show, the architectural has basically a glass structure on the tower, right? Is that something that, and then you look at other pictures and it doesn't look like glass. So is there some kind of a general plan as to whether or not it's going to be that look or something like a regular conventional stucco front type look? And secondly, if it's like this, will they do a study on solar reflection and also shade?
Yeah, so it's to be determined what the towers will actually look like. I don't think they'll be stucco though, but it could be some sort of mix of metal panels and glass. The glass typically will not be a reflective type of glass, so it'll have a shading coefficient to protect heat gain from the interior, but it won't be reflective in nature. It'll be more just a transparent glass, because that's, when you live in an apartment, you really want a clear glass, view. I don't know, Bruce, you were gonna say something?
No, I would only say that, we think that more attention needs to be done for those back, more study needs to be done for those back buildings. Again, our focus is to really, engage the community, find out what comments we get back, and then figure out how to design those back buildings.
It's really kind of just showing this concept, this idea of creating a place in the center of town. The density is what allows the developer to offer a public plaza space. That's kind of the way it works. Otherwise, you just sort of build end to end on the site and you maximize as much as you can get and keep the height down a little bit. If you go up, you're allowed to, you give back something to the public, and it's just a matter of now identifying if this is the right answer for this, which we think it is, and could be. And then taking in the other comments that we get and trying to perfect it so that it's something we can all be proud of.
Okay. Any other questions? Jennifer?
So you had some completed projects that you were showing from other towns that looked like you were using Jersey City, Hoboken, Morristown, so those the
and Mark.
Right.
I mean, do you have completed pictures of buildings of this size in towns that are actually comparable to what Palm Lakes looks like? Jersey City is not a good comp. That house is one of the largest buildings in the state of New Jersey. Morristown just recently, and correct me if I'm wrong, they just had ordinance capping the buildings going forward at 4 stories now.
Make Miller.
Could be, I'm not sure.
Not in redevelopment areas.
See, but these towns that you're using to show completed, Palm Lakes does not look like any of those towns. You have a picture of a building of this size completed in a town that looks like Palm Lakes, and what that looks like in the middle of the town of ours.
Well, we try to show what it'll look like by doing these drawings, by showing the model. But you're right, most towns that won't, that's why it doesn't happen in a lot of towns. And they do more like a 5-story, and you just go wall to wall, line to line, and that's what gets built. And that's one choice. That's what the developer could do here in this case. He's trying to do something a little more iconic and a little different. But you're right, there's not a lot of good examples I can say for that.
And what does this look like going forward? So, and I don't know, right, so this is definitely not something I have any expertise in, but that area where this building is situated, entering and exiting that side of town, I mean, is it even possible to build anything that could even level the sight line after that? Or I can't imagine anything else going in there after this is up.
In terms of other buildings adjacent, and things like that.
So this would just be it, this would be this giant building in the middle of town and everything else would remain at where we're at currently now with our height restrictions?
The answer is yes. And the reason for that answer is that the outline, if you look at the tax map, we do have a copy of the tax map. It shows the restrictive nature of the parcels, and the site assembly would be very difficult. Our zoning recommendation under the downtown redevelopment area 1 zone would be that any property would have to have 1.75 acres, 300 feet of depth, and 200 feet of width, all the way back in a square. So the run would also be that. There's no other property on Wanacue Avenue that can achieve those dimensions, not even close. So the short answer is yes, and the reason for the answer is that this is the largest, most square, most situated, best situated project site for this type of project. Other than that, you would not get the investment, you would not get the plaza, it wouldn't fit anywhere else.
Anybody else? Okay, let's, who's next? Anybody? Or,
You know, that's essentially it, except for our data point, right? Our data points.
because I'd like the board to weigh in.
Oh, yeah, no,
Okay.
any time, of course.
Okay, finish up what you got.
Our data points are placed up on the board for you. There's approximately 590 parking spaces. We will have the ground self-park spaces of approximately 200 to 220. We will have a minimum lot width, as I mentioned, 234 feet, a minimum lot depth, as I mentioned, 325 feet. Our zoning request, which I have for your planner and for the board, and I'll read it, is one simple change, similar, by the way, to Meridia had one simple change, and that is that except for those properties meeting the expanded lot dimensions described in this paragraph, as defined as a minimum 1.75 acres with a minimum frontage along Wanacue Avenue of 200 feet, which is also the minimum rear yard width, and having consistent lot minimum depth of 300 feet over the entire 200-foot front yard, that the height shall be measured from Wanacue Avenue of 170 feet maximum. If that provision is not provided for in a reasonable format, we cannot proceed. We will not be able to proceed. Now, we have no problem with design standards. We have no problem with traffic. We've done the traffic study extensively. Mr. Beltry has done and is here with all the work on the tax issues and on the easement and any lien issues that we have. We've done all that research. We have the maximum height is 170 feet from Wanacue Avenue. The minimum front yard setback, and this is from the architect, 9 feet, and the minimum yard setbacks would be consistent at 0 feet. The impervious coverage, we have 5% difference, which I think we can get over, because we will meet and achieve the green standards on top of the buildings for that extra 10% provided in your ordinance. So we do have that. We do have the school-age children study. The school-age children study shows that we would have approximately 30 school-age children generated by this project, and that includes the affordable units. We have the affordable units imputed here as well. The pilot that we would be proposing, we have that outlined as well, would force us, if you will, by nature to be the largest taxpayer in the town. We would do a community benefit program with the town, whether it's a waterway walkway, whether it's a pedestrian bridge, whether it's community facilities, we would certainly do that. Our issue is, and I understand your process, and so does Mr. Satrakian, our issue is that we understand, Mr. Chairman, loud and clear from last time, that only the mayor and council can change the quote-unquote redevelopment plan. I understand that they take your feedback, but without that height or some semblance of it, we can't proceed. And, we've done all this. We will, by the way, we'll meet next week. Week after is a little tough, come next couple of weeks. But in January, we will be at forums. We will answer all questions. Every day we work on this project. Vaskin works 20 hours a day sometimes on it. We really are working hard to make sure that this is done the right way. And we will take all your feedback, your design standards. We will meet your design criteria. What we need is to have the height. We have done the traffic circulation and the traffic work, and that's why Mr. Oliva's here tonight. And by the way, he's just the best in the state. He's here tonight because without him and without his analysis, we don't know how the height would work. And we've worked out the number of units, the traffic count, the parking count, and to your point, how would the retail users occupy the building and the site. So that's where we're at, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, and we're going to give all the documents tonight.
Okay. Tom, you want to start? questions, comments?
A couple things. First, looking at the model, is that little building in the back here, is that the solar products behind it? It is.
Yeah, it is.
So it's not really affected. My question is, how is that factory affected by this building? That was my first question.
We have a 15-yard rear yard setback, not a 10-foot rear yard setback. So we have a 15-foot rear yard setback, not 10-foot, that is generally required, so that we stay away from the solar facility. And Mr. Velch's here, the easement that we have for the driveway is our property. There's only one easement granted, and that's to the solar company. There's no easement granted to anyone else in that location. There's what I call a reverse easement with Lot 2. Lot 2 is near the alleyway where you can only make the right-hand turn out. That easement adjoins with the easement granted by us to the property owner, and basically the geometry is our driveway, easement granted to the solar company property, easement granted to Lot 2, that springs you out back onto Montague Avenue. That's the racetrack that was developed, the oval.
And solar's still gonna have parking available to themselves, I guess?
They'll have their property as it is now.
Okay. The other thing is, I happen to live on the other side of the river back there. Is this gonna affect the water flow at all at a time of flood? I understand that the building will probably be open and the water will probably go into it, but,
Really, the DEP looks that we cannot have an impact on the groundwater, on effectively the floodwaters as a result of building a project like this. So we would have to go through that process, which is rather lengthy, to receive a permit in order to pull any type of building permit from the town to build a project like this. All of that information is made public, and in fact, I believe as part of an FHA permit, if you're within 200 feet, you receive all the materials and public notice of it as well.
okay. And I just want to say, I thought the Meridia project was going to be the showcase in Pompton Lakes, because it's a beautiful building and we spent a lot of time in review of that building. This is awesome. I think it's fantastic. I think it's the plaza is great. I think it's on the right track. Thank you.
We worked on the Seymour Street and also Palisade Court in Inglewood. I know someone from the public mentioned other towns. Every town has its own character. So Holy Name Hospital has issues with height on Queen Anne Road. Palisades Court is an island off of Palisade Avenue in downtown Inglewood. It has a plaza within a plaza, and then has Depot Square. So, people would say, well, you're not going to use the plaza. You absolutely are, because of these types of examples and the nature of it. And you're 100% right. So Seymour Street is the plaza at Wellmont. That actually has a very interesting easement use for public purposes, where it's cross-permitted. And we envision something like that here as well.
Great.
Dean?
I commented on it last time. I saw it a little different here than it was first time, but I think it could be a great project. I'm sure it's got to go through a lot of eyes. I've made a comment before that we look at some of these buildings that we have downtown already that are kind of beat up and run down, and it doesn't seem like that's really helping us any much. I kind of like the project myself. I think that in the middle where you have that walkway and you can have the commercial inside on both sides would be something that would be pretty wild. And that's it. I like the project.
Good.
Quick question for you. The retail square footage that you have now, what will it be? Will you be adding additional square footage with the new, or it'll be exactly?
It'll be approximately the same.
Amount?
Yeah, the same amount. And just to your point, remember, we put up on the board the conditions that you currently have now today. And Iron Forge to the left, it's about 6.5 stories. I don't want to embellish the height because the stories aren't a full 10 foot. You get the point. And you also have the Salvation Army building, which is, or as I call it that, 4 or 5 stories. It's a very nice, attractive building. And of course you have Capadaglia. We're not criticizing, but Capadaglia is pushed on the sidewalk. And it also has an entranceway right in the sidewalk with a staircase. You can see it now being constructed. We don't have any of that. We've pushed everything back and made it much more pedestrian friendly.
The road that, the alleyway, it's 24 feet, but it's actually 45 feet wide. Is that two-way or?
Two-way.
Oh, it is. Okay, so that's.
That was one of the stipulations that the county had asked for, and it's one of the things that we feel is critical. A lot of these alleyways actually service two-way traffic. You just don't know if somebody's at the end as you're coming. They're not signs,
right,
one way or the other. And again, these are prevalent in many downtowns throughout the state, but this would be a two-way road and signed as such.
Okay. And then do you have any, like national retailers that you have discussions with? I mean, it's a large project. Would you be able to, perhaps market some of your retail to?
UBP has basically exhausted all the national retail. Of course, H as well, True Value. But UBP has basically taken that market away from us.
Okay.
I know, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned the two projects that took years. We also have to remember that UBP only took 9.5 months. And that included a very complicated vertical system of condominium. And it also took a long stretch of piloting versus tax appeals and those types of things. So it was a different complication than design standards and height. But it's still, if we get motivated, we could probably have this done because we're willing to meet with everybody anytime. And I know things have to be paced out, but we have these critical data points that are very, very important to Mr. Satrakian.
If I may say this, I'm torn apart between my loyalty to my existing tenants who want space in the new building and bringing additional retailers to town. Hug and Mug wants to expand, and I'm not going to let her down. We like her too much, and we want to keep her in town. The jewelry store, which is going to be a very upscale jeweler, we're going to keep them. And we have a projection screen company in our building. They want, by themselves, they want at least 10,000 square feet in the new building. I don't know how I'm going to provide all this. I have a problem right now. I'm oversubscribed already. So.
Good problem.
I was just saying, it's a great problem to have.
It is. So obviously, it's a question of pricing, and we're going to be reasonable because, again, I want to be able to save Huggy Mark because it's becoming a landmark.
Yes, it's a great place. Okay, and I do like the fact that, I mean, I understand the Meridian is right on the sidewalk. I'd like the idea that you have that 130 or 140 feet before you start the larger buildings. I understand that's going to be a sticking point to a lot of residents, but I really see the trade-off with having the charming, like, detailed building in front with that larger walkway. It might set a good precedent for the rest of our development too.
I mean, in my humble opinion, given the choice between more height and more open spaces versus less height and fewer open spaces.
Right.
So if you compare this to the Capodagli project, again, no criticism, that's a fine project, but this is, I think, better for the town, long term. And this is the trend long term. This is the direction that towns are taking. And to this lady's point about the fact that nothing like this exists out there, one of the reasons that these kinds of buildings are expensive to build and developers don't like to build expensive stuff. I'm crazy enough to do this. And, you're lucky to have it.
Okay. Anything else, Dad?
That's it for me.
Ken?
I mean, we're all concerned about the height of it, but I think that one of the trade-offs with the height is the fact that you're providing the parking spaces that are necessary for your building, unlike a lot of other sites that we have in town. So that, for me, is a strong draw to this project, and offsets the height a little bit for me in that respect. So I think it could be a good project.
So I guess that leaves me. I'm concerned about, and I understand the traffic was done, and I understand you have to, we all, if we go forward with something like this, have to deal with the present conditions that are there. The Windsor School, to me, presents a huge problem for that driveway. I just don't see much of a way around that. I think twice a day, that driveway is going to have school buses going up and down it. I know the town has had issues with the Windsor School and school buses for a number of years. It's gotten a little better, but, you know, and I think as I told you folks, and it's happened to me, there have been times when I've gone down that driveway and they won't let you down because they're loading school buses. You know, I mean, it's just the way it is. I'm somewhat concerned with the circulation around the building. I didn't know until the other day that the easement that you have is really the only two entities that are allowed, theoretically allowed to use the easement are your building and solar. This will be a question for our attorney. Since it's been used by everyone forever, does that have, I always forget that term, is
Adverse possession.
Adverse possession?
Of easement. That would depend on the facts, depend on if they're, I don't know, it's notorious because those people just are random users. They are not declaring ownership. Like when you have a property owner next to a property owner, you are declaring ownership by taking it over, adversely possessing it, just by walking on it. I don't know. It's worth thinking about, though. Okay. It's an issue.
If I may add a point here, whether we build a one-story building or a four-story building, we're gonna have this issue regardless of the Windsor School. And our position is that we're gonna be good neighbors. We're gonna allow everyone to use the driveway. And that's why the driveway is gonna be a 40-foot driveway or 35-foot driveway.
I'm just bringing up the concern that I have, that's all. I'm just bringing up the concern I have with the buses.
That's a very good point, and we, to Andy's point, you know, people have been using the driveway for a very long time, and at the same time, there is no legally binding reason why we have to allow them to continue using the driveway. But again, we don't want to make trouble, we are good neighbors, but it's not going to be easy for them. They have to figure out a way to better manage.
But it's also, if that structure is built in that back drive, and it's your property, you can build whatever you like on it, you know, if the town approves it. I'm not saying that, but it definitely interrupts the flow of what goes on back there. And there's no question that back, because of the property owners, it's chaos back there.
As a matter of fact, Andy, right now my parking lot is so full with their cars that this morning I came in and I didn't find a parking space.
With whose cars?
The
Windsor School, right.
That condition will not exist in 3 years, no matter what happens. And that's why, you know, Mr. Veltry's here. He's done the research with 2 title companies and the engineers. That condition will not happen. The use of driveway may be there, but not the use of our property. That won't happen.
Okay.
And we just don't want to choke something off and cut off our nose to spite our face. What we do have up on the board, Mr. Chairman, to your point, and to the other member's point, is the requested simple textual change to the ordinance. That's what we have up on the board, is what we're going to give to your professionals. That's what we're going to ask for.
I don't want to be sarcastic, but it looks like an eye test to me.
Well, that's, it may very well be an eye test, but at the same time, what we did is I read it into the record.
Okay.
And it is to the degree there is a record, it's about 4 significant issues, and that is taking the square, to the member's point, and making it the only place in town that can have this type of massing.
I understand that. You made your point. Let me just continue with mine. I also think that the project is, I mean, it's hard to criticize it. I think everybody loves the front building.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a masterpiece. There's no question about it. Just a question in general. Is this going to be a LEED building?
No.
No?
No, it will be energy efficient, but it will not be totally LEED certified of any silver, gold, or platinum level. We will have the green rooftop, and it will be efficiently built. But to go through those standards these days, unless it changes, adds about 5 to 10% per level. of leads.
Mhm.
So we're going to make it as efficient as possible, but it won't be LEED certified.
Okay, someone, I think, mentioned swimming pools? Pools, somebody used the word pools.
I did.
Oh, okay.
Is that correct? Do we not have?
Is that correct? And if so, where would they be?
We had a pool envisioned.
Okay.
That pool is no longer envisioned in this property because we had to shrink the distance between the towers to fit an extra 10 feet or so. And also on the other side of the property, we focus on the Windsor School side, but the other side, we had to shrink, if you will, the building in and the border in so that we had light effect on that building. So with that light effect, that extra 10 to 12 feet really took a lot out of the center of the core of the building.
Okay. And I guess my last comment is that while I do like the project, I think, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but I think the height is it's just too high. I've been doing redevelopment in town and around for quite some time. And I think to go to what one of the members in the audience said, you know, if you go to Morristown, you know, except for Speedwell Avenue, which has tall buildings, their residential buildings are nowhere near this. Neither is Montclair.
Well, Montclair has one coming.
One, okay, they may, but they don't have it now.
Lackawanna Plaza is huge.
You know, there's just not a place where this is. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be here, but I would so much like you to consider somehow making it not as tall. Those are my comments. Mayor, you have a comment?
Yeah, I got a couple. Look, you know, and I speak to the residents a lot. I think the presentation was great. I think the building looks great from the front. I think the courtyard, all the things everybody's brought up are excellent. I think the wide driveway is excellent. I think the way you had it set up. Your issues, which you have with your neighbors, are your issues that has nothing to do with us. The residents' concerns are twofold. The traffic, now, and it really has to be looked into greatly. It's not just we did a traffic study in the morning and a traffic study at night, and this is what we came up with. We gotta see, we don't want streetlights put in, we don't want more things. I don't know what the county's gonna say, left or right out of the building. I know with Meridian, they gave me some trouble making one direction and the other direction. We have to continue the flow on that street. It's a crowded street to begin with. Okay, no matter if you're there or not there, it's always a crowded street. Then the height. The height is too much for me right now, and to the residents too. I think the height is too much. Not saying it's a bad project. I'm not saying it can't work. I just think we have to work with the height a little bit because at the end of the day, I know we want to be the flagship of doing this. The flagship could go two ways. It could be great and everybody follows it, or we could be the last one and nobody does it ever again. It could go both ways. So I have to worry about that a little bit, but I'm for the project. I do agree with the project. I think it would fit well. And the other thing that no one's mentioned here, let's look what it's replacing where we are right now. There are some buildings there that we do not want anymore because of whatever reasons, situated in an area where these buildings will be coming down. That is a big plus. We are trying to bring in people who are downtown to shop. I know everybody wants to go back to the 70s where we had anchor stores and all these things. It's just not going to be that way. It's not going to be that way for us or any other town. Every other town is having the same situations we are. This is a way to keep us vital and staying alive and still having our retail and still doing our shopping and bringing in some extra tax dollars, which no one's talked about. This is a huge tax plus to the borough. You know, and I don't want that to be the deciding factor on how those things are, but those are the parts that come out of this. So I think the agenda I'm hearing is it's a beautiful project. It would fit well. It would fit probably better if it was a little smaller. That's just my opinion.
Any other professionals have anything to say?
Yeah, I think that in terms of the size, it is very large, and I think that what we would want to see, because you've said a number of times, we can't build this if it's not this height, right? Well, I think that we'd want to see what is it, you know, is it penciling out with 2 floors less or 4 floors less or something like that, because you know, you have the cost of building those extra floors also, or the cost of the parking for those extra floors or whatever. So I think that there's got to be something that, you know, when we're looking at this, it just can't be, it's 15 floors or nothing, because we're not seeing the economics behind it. This is redevelopment. so we can ask for the economics behind this, and I think that that
Who's gonna
would-
be the judge of the economics? Mr. Silverstein? I have no problem with that.
No, I think that if we need to bring in an outside, person to evaluate the economics, that's what we would do.
Are they
But
gonna
I
be
think
willing
that-
to finance it to build it? We started with 18 stories. We started with
Yeah,
18
but
stories.
you're just throwing out dollar numbers and stuff like that. I mean,
Well,
we have
we
to
have a-
understand it.
We have a pilot application that goes before you for $125 million total project cost. Do the math. All you need to know is that you need to generate at least 5% a year. 5% a year on that TPC is $6 million.
Well, when you submit your application, what I'm saying is submit
When
some of
we
this
have our,
information behind
when
it.
we have our amended ordinance, we'll submit all the applications you want. I don't know what we would be applying for.
Your application for redevelopment. We don't have an application for redevelopment. We're looking at concepts.
What's the
right now.
application for? Mr. Silverstein said on August 17th that it's up to the governing body to amend the redevelopment ordinance.
But we also said, go ahead.
No, I was going to go on to what Deb was saying. I think that obviously, I'm not a voting member, I'm not even a member of the public, although I grew up in town and I like the downtown. It's a sales job to convince many people about this height. There's several other issues. And obviously one of the things that you've said is that you need that height to generate enough units, to generate enough income to pay for the cost. As part of a sales job, it very well might be there are the same financial consultants that boroughs get to look at pilots. So they look at the costs that are going to be incurred versus the revenue that will be generated. Well, half of what they do is they have a really good sense of what things cost to build. And they can consult, they can look at your pro forma on what is the cost on a 13-story project versus 11 and versus an 8, and say, yep, that's sales. What they're saying is true. Or they can say, no, actually, because of what you said, you get 2 floors less. That much cost comes off, so you can still create enough revenue. I'm still talking. I'll let you talk. So that's what she's saying as part of. I think it's a help, is what she's saying, as part of the sales job. If in fact one of your impediments is the cost, there is a way to work with consultants that do this that could possibly back you up and say, yeah, they're right. It won't get built at any other height, and they're very good at looking at that. I didn't mean to jump in, Deb, but I think
That's the point that I'm trying to make. It's like you're hearing that height's an issue, and you're saying that the only way that you could do it is because, you need this many stories. Well, there has to be some type of proof that that's what is accurate.
So the issue isn't necessarily height per se. It's the fact that you need 380 units. And if you want to have the retail go along with it and the parking to be provided on site, that's the whole mix. So as you know, I wrote the book on this. I'm not going to go down that path, but the bottom line is that if we were to knock 3 stories, 4 stories off, it might look better, but then we would have to shrink the plaza, increase the front building height, and we get into all sorts of other iterations. We want to have to do that. If you want us to do that, we'll do that, and you've rejected our ordinance requirement. Mr. Satraki and the sponsors know what they have to do.
I remember when we met in April, Mr. Chairman, you said something which stuck in my head. You said you grew up in Morristown, and when they wanted to put up that high-rise in Morristown, everybody complained and nobody even pays attention to it. And that gave some reassurance that height will not be of a major concern.
But I think you knew from the last meeting that most folks up here had an issue with height.
Yes, of course.
You knew that.
Except for you.
No, I did the same thing.
Okay.
I said the same thing. But I think what I really said is that what folks in town don't really realize, and it was an issue when it went up, was Iron Forge.
Mm-hmm.
And now nobody knows it's there.
So if we came to you with a project like the one that we presented back in 2020, more like that, where we don't have the open plaza, we don't have the pedestrian walkways, and we have an 8-story, 7-story structure, still get closer to 380 units. Would you rather see that than this? I would think that this is much, much better, because I've spent countless nights comparing different proposals from different architects. I think this is going to be the most beautiful thing that this town could ever imagine having. And it's the end of the story. The height, people are afraid of height. I don't think people would pay attention to the height after it's built. And by reducing it by 3 or 4 stories, it's still going to be tall. It's still going to be a tall building. And so at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to do this project. It's not, when you say, would it pencil up at 8 stories? I've gone through the process of comparing 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I think there should be an 18-story building to really come to the point where we can make the cap rates that the market demands today, because interest rates have gone up. And investors are expecting 7% cap rates, up from 5%. So if anything, the building has to be taller, not less tall. And with all humility, I'm saying this. I'm a numbers cruncher. I'm a Wall Street guy. I can stand in front of any panel and prove to them that anything less than 12 or 13 stories will not work, and this project, it's going to be the end of this project. It's not going to work.
And I think that's what Deb was saying, show to somebody. That's, I think that, and I apologize. I think that's just one element of the sales job. And I understand, and I don't mean sales job, I mean convincing people to consider height, which is an impediment. So, I apologize.
No, that's right. No, you're right.
Yeah, and I think when we look at the model, it speaks for itself. You know, you don't see anything near that height. So in order for the board, and they're the ones that make a recommendation to the council, they need the background information on this. It's the financials, it's the visuals, you know, so if you're looking at something that's this big, they need to have an understanding of why that much is needed. You know, they may have thought like, okay, the last building, the height was 6 stories, right? So that took a lot, and you think of how long it took to get to that point. How do you get to this now, and why is it that there's a need for more than 300 units on that specific piece of property? You know, how do you get to that? And I think that that's the background that needs to be given. You've given the information of what you'd like to see, now it's the, how do you get to that?
And you've given that information very well.
Yes.
I mean, there's no question about that.
So let's assume for a moment that we can demonstrate that, and we can prove it.
No, we're not inclined to do that right now. We have an issue with doing that right now.
Well, but hypothetically, let's say if we could do it and we did it, are you going to say yes? No.
No, there's going to be something else that comes up. So we've dealt with the water, we've dealt with the sewer, we've dealt with the electric, we've dealt with the floodplain, we've dealt with the automated traffic and the traffic circulation, as Chuck pointed out. We've dealt with the height and the modeling and the shading. We've dealt with the Capitaglia. And now we're going to do finance. And what's after that?
This is a conceptual plan. You were told right from the beginning, this is a conceptual plan.
Right.
Okay, you're asking for an exception the way the board does their work, which they've done with every project prior to this. You're asking for something different than what they presented to other properties. So you're the one asking for something extra, not us.
Not necessarily, because UBP was on the same type of track, even different. UBP had a totally separate process.
The shopping center?
Yeah.
It was an entirely different thing.
Well, so is this.
No, but it's not. This is, come on, Bob. This is no different for this board than Meridian.
Sure it is.
Why?
Because that's 1.3 with a opening door right in the sidewalk, 1.3 parking spaces per unit, excuse me. That's 1.5, and that has 125 million. This thing costs less than half that.
Well, I'm just not going to address that, because what Meridian went through with the board and the mayor and council and the planning board, okay, should be the exact same thing that you guys do.
We have no problem with that process.
Okay, then if you don't have a problem with it, and this was a conceptual, you've heard from what the board thinks, okay, you've heard some things from the public, and you've heard from our professionals that, you know, one of the things that may help your cause is there a, you know, financial reason to do this. If not, or to consider whether or not the building could be a little shorter. I think that's all we're saying.
And all we're asking is for 5 lines to be considered by the council in an ordinance, and that's it. And everything else will be subject to.
But it's not subject to, because if the mayor and council say, let's assume they say, okay, you can build a 170-foot building. And then you come back to
The
us.
planning board could do that today, by the way, on this project.
But the planning board can't get it until we get it. Give it to
Yeah,
them.
I'm sure they can.
I'm sorry, let's.
Oh, absolutely they can. Look at your ordinance.
He said he can go right to the planning board.
Sure you can.
No, you can't, because that's a height variance of more than 10 feet or 10%.
It's in the redevelopment plan area, and the planning board in the redevelopment plan is allowed to extend all bulk variances, right in your redevelopment plan. Here it is.
Can I address?
Not the
Yes,
height.
you address.
Yes, the height.
No matter
Right
what
here.
you say,
That's a D.
That's what's written, not what's
you
said.
gotta let me talk, please don't interrupt. No matter what you say in a local zoning ordinance, you can't override the municipal land use law.
Right.
The municipal land use law gives authority and jurisdiction to planning boards and zoning boards. Only, and only, and only the zoning board can grant a D2 variance, which is a height variance of more than 10 feet or 10%. That's it, that's a jurisdictional question. Only the zoning board of adjustment can grant a variance for 10 feet or 10%. That's it, end of story.
That's it, is that you have your redevelopment plan allows for that adjustment.
It specifically says that it doesn't allow for a D variance.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't say anything about a D or a C variance. It doesn't. There it is, right there. Be that as it may.
I was going to say the same thing. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah. Be that as it may, we will present to the public, we understand Ms. Lola's concern. Our concern is that we've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, I would imagine exponentially more than others in their 2 or 3, 4-year process, and we will continue to do that. We just need an assurance at some point, some reasonable point in time, that we are not dealing with double jeopardy. We always understand that the governing body reserves the right. We got that. We also understand that the planning board reserves their right to do certain things. And as long as it's consistent with the master plan, we should be okay. The bottom line is, though, is that Mrs. Satrakian and the sponsors need to know at a certain point in time, and not a year or 2 or 3, when we can have the lack of double jeopardy. By the way, design standards, all of your issues, not a problem. The only problem is the density, if you will, the geometry of the site, and I'll be quiet.
Okay. Anybody have anything else?
It wasn't a D2, I think it's a D6. It's height, but anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a D6.
Okay. Well, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much for having us.
You're welcome. With that we'll go to the public discussion. Anyone want to address the board on anything? Seeing none, we'll close the, sorry, well, you didn't raise your hand.
You did.
Go ahead.
My name is Richard Chingeri, and I'm the one who built the models. And I wasn't familiar with the town, but we spent 3 months building that model. Now I know every single house built. If anybody has a question, can ask me. So my background is architecture, and people love the way I do models, so they kept me busy building models. So since 70s, 80s, I've been building models. So first I was involved in Times Square development, and then during 9/11, I started building World Trade Center development, and recently we did the Hudson Yard development. So practically, I know every single tower in Manhattan.
Wow.
And we do international work in Dubai, Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, and I'm busy day night playing with toys. You know? So this model is required for high-profile projects, and we do highly detailed, and I'm expert on it. I think you have high-profile projects, you know.
Oh, I do too.
And if I see the project is not high-profile, I don't produce it. I stop in the middle, you know. So concerning the height, when I was building the site, I saw this is not only height structure in your town. You see residential complex right on top of the hill. So that's kind of balancing with this height, you know. That's kind of natural height, and the building is structural height, you know. Another thing I noticed that this town doesn't have center. It has a lot of rental units, building for a story, but doesn't have center. Center require plaza where people can hang out, and even neighboring town, they will know this center and they will come together. In old time, when they couldn't build high-rise buildings, the center of the town will have an overlooks high, so from everywhere you can see the height. And there used to be clock tower, where they can see from everywhere that clock, and see that's the center of the thing. In Paris, you know, they built Eiffel Tower because there was no high structures. And that Eiffel Tower they built during the World Fair, where they had exhibitions, and was temporary. They were going to take it down. But now it's been over a century, they're keeping it, and it's a masterpiece. Same thing, Big Ben in London, they have a tower with a clock. So that's another thing. In Saudi Arabia, they're building 1 mile high tower, and every country competing to have the tallest towers, and you want the shortest tower. I think, seeing overall, I live, when I build models, I live the project. I live the vision of the architect. They say the idea, the vision, it's invisible. So any architect can have a vision, but invisible, nobody can see it. Then there is a reality. Between the reality and vision, the model comes. So the vision doesn't come clear, always need to be developed. So during the model, you developed, and you become close to the reality. So this project, it's very close to the reality. So it needs your support to become reality. And this center will attract every town around and will be example so that the other town will repeat the same example. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And one more thing. In Manhattan, it's common practice. If you provide plaza in front of the tower, they let you build 4 or 5 stories higher. So it's very common practice. This is kind of repeating that if there is a good idea, you just repeat it. You don't stop, you know. You see McDonald's business, it's succeeding. When it's good, they build another one. So this is same way.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public portion.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the board have anything to say? For the motion to adjourn?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Here's what we should do. Look, just that, it looks really nice.